Number 1. When the person is in constant communication with you. One of the simplest signs to know that a person is constantly thinking about you is his or her ability to keep in touch. Keeping in touch shows that you're on their mind. Otherwise, there are other things to get busy day and even forget that you exist. When the thought of you crosses the person's mind, he or she is swift to connect to you through any means, a call, a message via any medium, and so on. The person does not try to give excuses for anything. Communication goes beyond just talking or opening your mouth to speak. Talking without comprehension or understanding cannot be said to be communication. Before it can be said that you have communicated, there must be an equilibrium of understanding between you two. When a person thinks about you constantly, it shows that you hold a beautiful place in their heart, and as the saying goes, where your treasure is, there will your heart be. Lack of communication and giving of excuses is often the first sign to show that you are not on the mind of the person, or the person does not think about you constantly. Unlike animals, humans make out time for something that is dear and of value to them. Therefore, when a person holds your relationship dear and sees it as something valuable, he or she thinks about it constantly, and hence the constant communication. A husband and wife that leave the house for work in the morning and never care to hear from each other throughout the day till they meet again at home have communication issues, and this shows that they don't think about each other constantly. Otherwise, there will be regular checks and communication which nourishes the relationship and makes it. Therefore, take note, when a person keeps and maintains a strong communication channel or a link with you, it's an obvious sign that the person thinks about you constantly. Number 2. When the person cares about your well-being. When a person thinks about you constantly, it's obvious in the way the person cares about you and all that concerns you. When a person is always concerned about you, he or she wants to know if you've eaten, if your day went well, if there were any challenges you had or are facing, and so on. That shows that you are on the mind of the person. If, for instance, you told the person something about yourself a day before or so that you will be traveling, the person will never forget. He or she will call and send a message to find out about your journey, preparations, plans, etc. And this is because he or she thinks about you. The person would care about everything that has to do with you. He or she would always want to know and be involved in everything that has to do with your well-being, physical, mental, financial, etc. Beyond just knowing, the person goes as far as helping you out or being of assistance in whichever way that's within his or her capacity. To care about a person's well-being, there has to be some level of selflessness. Because you're always on his or her mind, the person would give themselves to you and further see to it that everything is well with you. And this is usually not without some obligations. Number 3. When the person talks about you to friends and family. When a person thinks about you constantly, the person talks about you with people that are paramount in his or her life. People will always say what is in their mind. Therefore, when you occupy the mind of someone who thinks about you constantly, the person will spill it to his or her family members. Sometimes, even before the person informs their family, it will be obvious in his or her countenance that someone or something special is on the mind of the person. Next, his or her family will be aware that there is someone special in their life. For a person to think about you constantly means that you are on the mind of the person, and therefore, other people that are in the mind of the person too, to know about you. The person tries to integrate you into part of his or her life and the important persons in his or her life. The person is not shy or ashamed of you or does not feel bad associating with you. Being on the person's mind means something attracted the person to you, and whatever the thing is, it is obvious it is what the person loves. And because it is what the person loves, then there is no shame in admitting it. On the contrary, when you're not on the person's mind, the person hardly thinks about you. Then there would not be the obvious signs that something is on the person's mind. You know that a person thinks about you constantly when those close to him or her knows about you even before you know them. When you're meeting his or her people for the first time, you hear things like, "We know who you are, we've been told about you," and the likes. Such a statement warms the heart and makes it feel good. On the other hand, when the person does not bother telling people in his or her life about you, then know for sure that he or she does not think about you constantly. Maybe once in a while, yes, but not a constant thing. The reverse is also true. Does he or she know you about the people in he or she will live? If yes, then you are obviously in the person's mind, because as he or she tells their family and friends about you, he or she also tells you about them. Number 4. When the person is willing and eager to tell you about his or her plans. When a person thinks about you constantly, the person will be willing and eager to tell you about his or her plan, and this is for no other reason than the fact that you are on the person's mind. The person carries you along in their plans, not because they are obliged to, but because you have been in his or her heart. He or she finds you worthy to be aware of his or her plans. When a person thinks about you constantly, there is no need to be secretive with you. He or she feels safe with you, and so the person opens up to you to tell you his or her plans. When a man thinks about his wife and family constantly, he will not take or make any decisions without thinking about them or telling them. Likewise, when a woman thinks about her husband constantly, she acknowledges him as her Lord and carries him along in every decision-making. When the reverse is the case, such a union is on the verge of breaking. A guy who does not think about you constantly will not deem it fit to tell you about his plans, and so also, a lady that has not put you to heart will not see it as a matter of necessity to tell or involve you in her decision. In other words, to think about you constantly is to put you to heart. When you don't have a place in his or her heart, you can't force yourself in. Carrying each other along in decision-making is one of the ingredients that nourish a relationship. When it is one-sided, such a relationship cannot thrive. Therefore, when a person thinks about you constantly, he or she seeks to nourish such a relationship by telling you about his or her plans. In a nutshell, the openness and transparency of a person to you is an obvious sign that the person thinks about you constantly and values your place in his or her life. Number 5. When the personal priorities you. To prioritize is to give first place or to consider first above other things. When a person thinks about you constantly, he or she gives you a top place in his or her life. The thinking about you constantly will be obvious, his or her actions and dealings with you, and one of which is that the person cannot put you in the middle or the last of his schedules or her schedules or to-do list. You will earn the first place in the person's life. A home where each member of the family is not given priority cannot stand the storms of life. When a husband does not prioritize his wife over his job or work, then it shows that he does not constantly think about her. The same goes for the wife too. She ought to put her husband and children above her work to show that she constantly thinks about them. When a person prioritizes you in his or her life, your opinions as touching any matter are very important to him or her. Such a person would not want to do anything to hurt you because of your feelings for him or her. When a person prioritizes you, it denotes love, commitment, and accountability, and this is possible because he or she constantly thinks about you. In other words, without first the thought of you, there can never be love, commitment, or accountability to you. When a person shows all three attributes, they are obvious signs that the person thinks about you constantly.